nearly 40 years ago when I retired from music and
Yeah.
left the business. I said I would never produce another record,
Hmm.
ever. And people have come in through the YouTube channel and asked for help and all kinds of stuff. And I declined. I did help one young lady back east open some doors for her. But the announcement is that I produced the first record that I've produced in nearly 40 years. It came in as a song demo, 3 instruments only, from an artist I worked with in the 80s, Bobby Brooks, who's an Alabama country boy. And he wrote a
Okay.
song. He did a 3 song demo. And he said, "What do you think of the song?" And I said, "Bobby, let me have the track. And I'm going to make calls and I'm going to have Ray Cork, rest in peace. Now he died in December of 22nd,
Yeah.
December 22nd of last year. And he wrote the charts for Grazing in the Grass and Going in Circles for the Friends of Distinction. I'll have him write the horn parts. I'll have a group called the Gringos back in COD. They'll play Ray's horn charts. Going to have a top saxophone player come in, do the sax solo, have the Gringos guitarist play the rock solo, get my 25-year-old singer that I helped via her inquiry through the YouTube channel, have her do all the background singers, do all the background vocals, and add a whole bunch of percussion and other stuff and turn a 3 tune demo into a finished kind of retro country rock production. And it
Wow.
got released last week. And the
Oh, wow.
press release came out Monday. And at Bobby's request, Bobby Brooks, the artist, he said, "I want the press release to focus on you because there may be some name recognition that you have, and focus the single secondarily." And my goodness, I'm getting people writing back saying, "You're back." And I got, I got, I got, I got an email from Jerry Peters, who wrote "Going in Circles" and played piano on it, saying,
Yeah.
Welcome back to the business." And I
Wow.
said to myself, I said, "Am I back? I didn't do this. I didn't do this to be back. I did this to help Bobby, and we're just leading with me. And now people are writing in saying, 'Welcome home.'" And I thought,
Wow.
isn't this interesting?
That's,
So
yeah.
I also ended up offering, not on the press release, but uh, the YouTube channel started. My YouTube, I'm start over. My YouTube channel started 7 years ago when I said, "I'm just going to tell my stories about going to be a staff producer." And then when I left, all the way through retirement.
Mhm.
And when I got through with that, I thought, wait a minute, I can take my old tracks and maybe crisp them, how you say it, make them a little more crisp.
Certainly. Certainly.
And
Crisp them up.
and
Yes.
that led to saying, well, if I can do that, I can add samples and put in power snares and all kind. If I had had the budget in the old days to go in and do this stuff
Mhm.
and continue to remaster until I had a really great product, instead of being an assembly line producer who had a small budget and just went in, did it quickly, mixed it as it was played by the musicians, exactly as played, and went on to the next project. This is what it would sound like if I had the ability to make them into power records.
Yeah.
So I've
Wow.
been doing that one item at a time for a long time now, and I've finally hit my stride. I'm feeling really good about it, and I put an offer on my last clip saying anybody that wants their stuff improved, $100 a track, because
Love
I
it.
love doing it. I love
Yeah.
doing it, and I've already done 4 or 5 people's stuff, so I'm thrilled. Most producers and most artists say like it the way it is, but occasionally, particularly when I show the difference, and there'll be a new track coming up today showing before and after.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, give the old guy a shot. Let him
Yeah.
try it.
That
So
is
we'll
fantastic
see.
news. I'm very, you know what, timing. That's what this is, because it might be very difficult in the future to get an interview with John Florez. apparently where we've got a resurgence here. I mean, who knows? I mean, but yeah, no, that's really really awesome stuff.
That was never the intent. Back
Of
when
course
I
not. Yeah.
retired, I went to career counseling in Westwood, and it
Mhm.
was expensive. And the bottom line, after all those interviews and all the tests, was they said therapist. And I said, well, what do you think I've been doing for the last 17 years? My artist, I'm a
Yeah.
therapist. And so I'm back in Nashville finishing a session with Ron Reynolds as the engineer. He died about a year and a half ago, maybe a year ago. He's Hall of Fame country engineer. And I'm
Sure.
in the Nashville airport, and there's this little 9.99 book that said find your perfect career.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'll get on the plane, I'll take these tests, and by the time I hit LA, maybe they'll tell me what my
You'll
perfect
have a
career
career.
is. $9.99 after $3,000 in Westwood. So I'm getting ready to land in LA, and this thing totals up out of the book and says computers. I
Yeah.
said, well, that's crazy. You get what you pay for $9. I don't know the
Yeah.
first thing about computers, but for 38 years now, I've been a computer IT guy and trainer and support and authorer and all this
Mhm.
stuff, film editing, audio editing, websites, corporate training, seminars across the United States for SkillPath, Intel, all this stuff. And I knew nothing. I started at a Computerland store in Glendale, California, from an ad in the paper, and they said, John, this is the DOS prompt. And I said, the what?
Nice. Oh, the DOS prompt. Don't love the DOS prompt,
And then
but
I told
absolutely.
then
Oh,
I
yeah.
then I told yeah that then I told my wife at the time. I said I said, this is interesting. I'm doing some pickup work, just learning how to do this, but I wonder when my real career is going to start.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this
And
this
here
was
you
it.
are, right?
It's morphed into all kinds of versions of technology, but it was all PC related, never Apple,
For
and
sure.
it's just wild.
Yeah. Life is like that sometimes. It's funny. We're already 15 minutes in. Why don't if I could get you to tell your
Absolutely.
origin story. John Florez, the student becomes John Florez, the staff producer at RCA. Like how does that begin? And yeah, I'll just let you tell the tale.
There were two spiritual moments, and I was I was an agnostic. I was 21, 22 years old, so I didn't know what that was about. And I was a senior at Arizona State in communications, saying, oh, I don't know, they're teaching us fonts. What am I gonna? I don't care about fonts. I'm in the studio in Phoenix making local records, and I'm having a blast, thinking, boy,
Yeah.
that would be fun. And I'm traveling to LA and New York, ditching school and taking my little acetates around pre-cassette days and walking in, because you could in those days, and
Sure.
handing them out to A&R guys and saying, what do you think? And nothing really came of that. My band that I was the leader of, we went into the studio here in Arizona, and the owner of Audio Recorders, where they did the Duane Eddy sessions and the initial Waylon Jennings sessions and things like that. My band was in there, and my guys threw me out of playing on the tune Broadway on Broadway.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
they said,
Yeah.
John, why don't you sit in the control room next to Tim, the engineer, and just sit this one out? So they kicked me out of the studio, and I sat down next to Tim Ramsey, the owner's son, the engineer, and said, there was like a spiritual awakening. It was, oh my God, this is where I belong,
Wow.
in the control room of a recording studio. So I kept doing it, and Floyd Ramsey introduced me. He said, you got to meet this guy, Ray Cork. He's an arranger. And I said, hey, great. And Ray and I did three things together, one of which was an artist by the name of Ronnie David, who was a Liberace protege and managed by Liberace's manager. this singer pianist, and we did a full orchestra thing that Ray arranged on him. And Ronnie David, the artist, took that master to RCA New York and met a man by the name of Don Berkheimer, who was head of A&R at RCA New York. And Ronnie came back to town, and I said, "Hey, did you get a deal?" And he said, "No, but Mr. Berkheimer, he wants to know who the kid is that produced this thing." And
Well
said,
then.
and he wants you to call him. So I called him, and he said, "John, an opening will be coming up at RCA LA office for an A&R guy, and I want you to call Joe Reisman, who's head of A&R on the West Coast." Well, I didn't. And I didn't because I wasn't ready. I didn't think I had enough chops, and I was still in school, and I didn't know. So I ditched school again and cut a session in LA. Ray and I flew over there and did that together. And Ben Barrett, who contracted the musicians, that's the guy that will, if you call him, he'll hire everybody that you want to play on the dates. He calls me the next morning at the motel, and he says, "Young man," he said, "you have a kind of a really special way of working with people in the studio. I'm blown away." And he said, "I'd like to take you over to RCA in an hour or two and have you meet Joe Reisman." And I thought, well, this is odd. Now, flashback 6 months prior, I'm at the Playboy Club in Phoenix, and there's a psychic performing. I didn't know, I've never even heard of a psychic before. And he's in the main room at the Playboy Club, and my friends are the jazz trio in the lounge. So we, with the band, are standing at the door watching the audience watch this psychic, Dr. Richard Ireland. And the band has to go back and play again, so I'm leaving with them. And this guy, Dr. Ireland, he's blindfolded, and he has tape over his eyes and blindfolds and whatever. And I'm leaving from the very back of the room, and he says, "John." And I keep walking because I'm not in the audience. He says, "No, John Florez." And I turn around, and he said, "You are going to have a job at a major label this fall." And I said, "Right." And walked away. And just put that in the back of my head. Now here I am 6 months later sitting with Joe Reisman, and Dr. Ireland had said, "There will be a meeting that you'll be in at a major label with two older guys and you offering to hire you." Well, that's exactly what happened. And Joe Reisman said, "Wait a minute, John Florez," and he pulls open his desk drawer, and he says, "Look, you're number 2 on our list of possible hires." And here I am, I'm still in college, I'm a senior at ASU. And I said, he said, "Well, Don Berkheimer said you were supposed to call me." And I said, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. I didn't have the chops. I wasn't ready. And I said, "But out of curiosity, who's number 1 on your list?" And he said, you went away. Craig, the name Craig Wright came up. That's interesting. So I said, "Just out of curiosity, who's number 1 on your list?" And he said, "Well, a guy by the name of David Gates." And David Gates would become the lead singer and writer and Bread behind the group Bread. "I want to make it with you," and if a picture paints 1,000 words, la la la. Well, I already knew of David's work, and I said to Joe, I said, "My God, Joe, he's really good and he's experienced. Why don't you hire him?" And Joe says, "Because he wants a salary, John. We think you're willing to work for next to nothing. You're a student. We would bet on the fact we could have you pretty cheap."
Classic business people, right?
I said, oh my God, okay, yeah, you're right." And he said, "And I'll give you 1 year at that nothing salary, which was $8,400 a year. And if you haven't had a hit within 1 year, then go back to school, do whatever you want. But you got a year starting this fall."
Mhm.
Just like Dr. Ireland predicted. So I started in the fall of '68, and almost immediately called David Gates and said, forget your production. I love your production, but you're a great singer and songwriter. Why, let me sign you.
Mhm.
And he said, I thought the irony would be great. You know, the guy who's number one on the list gets the artist deal instead of the low paying thing that I got.
That's
And
funny.
David said, well, you know, we have a deal pending. This new group I put together, Bread, it might be with Elektra, but boy, if they don't sign us, I'm coming to see you, John. And the rest of that is history.
Yep.
So Joe Rice keeps bugging me and saying, you haven't signed anybody yet. And by late fall, I went to a show at the Daisy, a small Beverly Hills nightclub, and the Friends of Distinction, managed by Jim Brown, the Hall of Fame football player. They debuted. They did a showcase for the business, and here's this young little rookie, Johnny Flores, coming up and saying, "I really want to sign you," thinking they'll never sign with me, and they did. He
Oh,
had
wow.
two gold records right out of the box, and I am blown away because I don't know what I'm doing. The first record was Grazing in the Grass. Harry Elston, the leader of the Friends of Distinction, he put the lyrics to Hugh Masekela's instrumental Grazing in the Grass that Hugh wrote, got permission to put the lyrics on. We cut that. That was out for between 3 and 5 months, and the head of promotion on the West Coast for RCA came to me and said, sorry, nothing's happening with it. You're going to have to move on and release something else. In the meantime, Pat McMahon, who is a celebrity broadcaster here for 50 years here in Arizona, he is legendary and is in our Hall of Fame in Arizona. He
Mhm.
was at the time program director of KRIZ Radio, the top 40 station in the market. And he had just won the award, it was either Billboard or Gavin's award for program director of the year for the nation. And he said, hey, John produced this thing, Grazing. I'm Grazing in the Grass. I'm going to play it. Boom.
Yeah.
The record that RCA said was dead, and I had to get the next one ready. Went to number 3 in the nation and went gold, and my jaw dropped.
Yeah.
Whoa! And that was
Wow.
followed by going in Circles, which was a B-side, and on that, the rhythm section was just so nothing. I mean, it was like no-dose time. You could nod off to our rhythm date. And
Yeah.
I turned to Ray Cork, said, Ray, we're going to have to shelve this. This is really boring. He said, John, I got an idea for the orchestra. It's going to go bring it home.
Great stuff.
Don't.
Yeah.
So he did that, and it gets played on I'm sorry, it gets played on it gets played on KHJ radio, which was the number 1 in LA. Disc jockey says, that's a huge orchestra. Listen to that orchestration. And I'm thinking, yeah, on our budget, that was 2 violins, a cello, and a viola.
Wow.
Huge orchestra. That's Ray Cork, because Ray was brilliant.
That's
He
in.
was doing.
If I could just interrupt you for just a second. By the way, I love that record. That record to me, there's elements for
Thank
me.
you.
It sounds a little bit like what Isaac Hayes was doing at the time with Hot Buttered Soul. Like, but I can't believe that you're telling me that you're talking about just a couple of string pieces because that song just has that huge sound to it and. Oh, it's that one just, and I didn't even really know about that one. And then I started watching your channel, and then I saw it, and I was like, oh wow, or I heard it, and I was like, this is anyway. It's fantastic that you did that with that few instruments for sure.
The brilliance of Ray Cork, Batkin Jr., also rest in peace. Perry, he wrote Nadia's theme, which is the theme from the Young and the Restless soap opera, which allowed him
Okay.
to retire 30 years ago because it's franked him retirement funds all these years. And he also wrote Bless the Beasts and the Children for a movie, which was a Carpenter's hit.
Mm-hmm.
He said, your guy, Ray Cork, John, forget me. He said, your guy is one of the only people around who is writing well outside the box. He is just a creative treasure.
Wow.
And in the meantime, ironically, Tom Bell, who's on the other side of the country and died on the same day, this past December 22nd, that Ray died,
Yeah.
at the same age. They're both age 79.
Wow.
Tom was experimenting with symphonic stuff that nobody was doing in pop soul. He was doing it out of Philadelphia, and Ray was doing it with 4 bassoons and 3 piccolos and muted trumpets and all this stuff on our Grazing album. They never met each other, but they were both in a league all by themselves.
Absolutely. I completely agree. If we could go ahead and turn the topic, I would love to talk
Sure.
about this gentleman. I'd love to talk about this record. For me, this one for me has been like, and people use big words, but revelational. I can't believe that this record, like, because I've been like a soul music guy for much of my life, but I can't believe that I just discovered this like in the past couple of years. And the fact that this, because I consider it like probably one of the top 5 best soul albums of the 60s. We know that, the 60s weren't the best soul album time. There was a lot of B-sides, there was a lot of filler, but this one is all killer. Just a magical thing. So I guess, if we could start, tell me about meeting Willie Hutch, and about your impressions of him, I guess, and how you came to make this fantastic record.
LA is a very small community. In fact, Marilyn and Billy from the Fifth Dimension, within the past year, said, yeah, we went to your site and we had no idea you worked with so many of our friends, because they all knew each other. They were all coming up at the same time. And so Willie was one of them. And Willie had written, I Guess I'll Learn How to Fly, and I forget.
California
Anyway,
My Way, I think, was another one. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll start over. Good. So Willie had written for the Fifth Dimension. He'd written, I Guess I'll Learn How to Fly, in California My Way. And I loved the tunes. And turns out that the Friends of Distinction, and particularly Harry Elston, was really close to Willie. So I said, Harry, can you bring him in? I want to hear what other songs he's got. So he comes up to my office at RCA and starts playing his new material, which I think I'm going to listen to for the Friends of Distinction. And I stopped him midway through and I said, Willie, nobody should be singing these except for you. Let me try to get you a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in. Joe Reisman fought me on it, but we got it done. And we went in and recorded those cuts, which Willie wrote them all. Willie sang them all. Willie wrote the background parts. Willie hired all the musicians and the background singers. Willie played guitar in it. Willie arranged it. I was his babysitter.
That's funny. Wow.
That's a true R&B album. I was known. In fact, I was hired because I said I wanted to do pop R&B.
Mm-hmm.
And this was not pop R&B. This was R&B, and Willie showed me. He really taught me what to do. And I sat back, watched him do his thing. I do not know which cuts they are, but there are 3 cuts on that album where it wasn't the rhythm section that was on the entire rest of the album. The main thing was that Abe Mills wasn't available, and Abe Mills is basically the sound of that album.
Wow. Okay.
The rhythm in. So we went in, we cut those tracks. It was seamless because Willie was a total pro and he just knew how to do everything. So we arranged and conducted. We got all the tracks done. We're ready for him to put on his lead vocals, and we go into RCA Studio B one evening, and we're 30 minutes in, and he says, John, we're going home. And I said, we're what? And he says, John, it's kind of like a football team that shows up for the Super Bowl and it's just not their day.
Mm-hmm.
This is not going to happen for me tonight. So professional that he was, he didn't burn the studio time like everybody else would have to try to get us something that evening. So let's come back tomorrow night. And the next evening he sang all the tunes back to back in one take each.
Wow.
Blew me away. If I ever regret the vocal is slightly buried on the album, that is partially due to Ray Cork saying to me back on the Grayson album that my drums weren't loud enough on the Grayson album. So to bring up basically the bass and drums and have it be powerful. Well,
Sure.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I apologized to Willie back when we did it, and I said we can we can go over budget, and I can fix this. And he said, "No, it's fine, John. Just try to fix a little bit of it in mastering." And I don't think we did that great a job, though I have popped his voice more on the remasters at my site.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, you are okay. I'll have to, you know what? I'll have to check those out. I think the record is fantastic sounding. It's interesting because obviously it's your story. It totally makes sense because this record very much, it sounds very unlike much of your other work in terms of production. And I mean, obviously,
Correct.
you told why. I would say this one. I just got this one not too long ago. "Season for Love" from 1970. Can you tell me much about this one? This record. You know what? I remember you said on your website or on YouTube. You said that basically you were looking for like an AM pop soul sort of a thing, or more pop. And you know what? I avoided this record, frankly, because of that. But I just recently got into it, and I honestly feel like this is the sound of falling in love. This is just like immense and clearly, and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you as you're talking about, you can tell me, but there's a lot of John Florez on this, isn't there? Because there's just a lot of amazing string work all across this record. So yeah, tell me about how this album became, and anything you might remember. I mean, we're talking a long time ago, but with these sessions, which again, again, this is another record that I'm like, this record should have been multi platinum. It makes no sense to me. But anyway, about "Season for Love."
Thank you for asking about "Season for Love." This starts with the end of Soul Portrait being out there and doing absolutely nothing. Now, you can edit this out if you want, but it was a payola world, and RCA wasn't participating in that. So there were
By
other
the way,
labels that were.
sorry to interrupt, John, but I will not edit that out, and that's because just as a quick aside is just basically because you know what, the fact that you talk about that, I think, is brilliant and should be talked about, because these are the real conditions on the ground, and why some records are just like fantastic but do nothing, and why I'm not going to say garbage, but garbage does extremely well. And I mean, it just is what it is. So you lending this this truth is absolutely something everybody needs to know and understand, because that's the thing, nobody talks about this stuff, right?
Oh, I was with Lenny Warnaker years later and said, "Let's talk about it." And he said, "No, I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't want to talk about it." So yeah, some people did want to talk about it, and others didn't. But back in those days, RCA had no payola budget, and the Soul Portrait came out and did absolutely nothing. I really believe that a love that's worth having off of that is his classic off of that.
Absolutely.
I,
I totally agree. That song is so immense. It's just giant. Anyway, continue.
I believe that's his Otis Redding type of impact that he might have made had there been a payola budget. But that being said, that album had been out, and I heard this voice coming down the corridor at RCA LA toward my office, and it's Harvey Cooper, who became my partner twice over the years, but I hadn't met him at this point. He was head of promotion for RCA out of New York, and he was loudly, with four-letter expletives, talking about how awful the Soul Portrait album was.
Sure.
And I thought, oh my God, even the head of promotion hates it. No wonder we're not doing anything. So a light bulb goes off, and maybe shouldn't have. But Willie's a romantic. Willie likes to show that he can write romantically. So this album, Season for Love, is a romance, a lover's album. This is to fall in love to. Fine. But Willie didn't know we were going to do that. Willie, I don't know how the world works or how God works or spiritually how stuff works, but the universe brought him a personal manager at this time, and he didn't have one prior to that. And management was key to Axe being successful, and he chose J.W. Alexander. Is that J.W.
Yeah,
right?
that sounds correct. Yeah.
Sam Cooke's manager.
Okay, yeah.
And Sam Cooke was a legend on RCA. So I said, wait a minute, Willie, if we do Sam Cooke type love song material, first, you got him as a manager. Secondly, once we go that degree of, what would you call it, pop, much more so than pop R&B, pop, the pop division will take this record and not the R&B division, and maybe you'll have a chance because the R&B division is not supporting you. So we cut it, and Perry Botkin did most of the arrangements, the string and brass and vocal charts on that, and he's my lifelong friend. And Willie at one point came and said, "You're making me sound like Sam Cooke or sound like Johnny Mathis or whatever." And I said, no, that was what we were going to do. So we're doing it. His personal favorite off of it was "Walking on My Love." He believed that might have had a shot with that because it was the closest to being pop R&B on that album.
Mm-hmm.
So we finished that album, and it's very pop. It's middle of the road pop on purpose. And the head of the R&B division in New York calls and says, "What in the hell have you done?" And I said, I beg your pardon? And he said, "We can't promote this shit." He said, "This is a pop album. This is a pop album." I said, "I know. We know. It belongs in the pop division." He says, "John, I'm black. He's black. He's on my artist. I'm sorry. He's on my roster. He's black." Yeah. I said, "The music isn't." And he said, "I don't care. He's on my roster, and I certainly can't promote that." And I said, "Well, you weren't promoting the other either. So now what am I supposed to do?" So in the meantime, I have lost the Friends of Distinction because of a dispute with Jim Brown and management that I had. And Willie isn't being promoted. So I've got no main act, which was the Friends, and Willie isn't being promoted. And that's when I put in my notice that I was going to leave the label, because I thought I just give up. I mean, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Segue so we can finish just the payola segment is that my first independent project, which I won't even name or go into, we had a hit. This was right out of the box after leaving RCA. And the president of that label came to me and said, "You having fun making music, John?" And I said, "I'm having a lot of fun." And he said, "Well, here's a 2-page list of the stations I had to pay in order for your music to even be heard." And that's when I lost my virginity in the music business, because I thought, holy shit. It's not just what I've heard it is, here it is with my record. And it got to the point where I knew over the years, when I went in to record an artist, whether they would chart or not based on just knowing whether that was available to that artist at that label at that time. If there was no budget for that, it was very unlikely that anything would get heard. And my final example would be one of the last things I was involved with. I did not produce, but it was for a label that I was president of, a small little label. And a power player in country music came and said, "We will promote your artist, John," which was a country artist, "if you will take this artist that we have a single on, sign them, and release it." And he said, I will personally guarantee you that this will make it to 34 on the country music charts. Now, this was the worst sound. Radio hadn't heard it, public hadn't heard it. It is by far one of the worst things I have ever heard. I mean, God, it was awful. Guess where it went on the country charts? 34. So,
Wow.
I am blessed. Grazing in the Grass happened because Pat McMahon just said, "Oh, I'll play that at KRIZ Phoenix." Going in Circles happened because some DJ said, "This is a B-side. We're going to flip it and play this." What? Happened grassroots. It just
Yeah.
caught on. Rock the Boat caught on because a dance club in New Jersey started playing it live for dance sessions, and radio heard that and said, "Oh." So the first station we got on with Rock the Boat was what is it? Oh God, John, it's a brain fart.
Like in
The largest
did you say ABC or something in New York or something like that? Or
Yeah, sorry, very good. Yeah, I think it was WABC in New York. Said, "Oh, this is huge. They're usually the last station that you get. You earn that after you've been everywhere else." Boom, we shot up, I believe, to #1 on their chart because it was being played at a dance club in New Jersey. That was grassroots. So I never had payola support ever. I lucked out and had grassroots support on all three of my gold records. Just go figure.
Yeah. It's really just amazing when you think about like that reframes a lot of the way I think about music. Just because, and it makes me, that's the thing is I love like a lot of obscurities and stuff like that. But it
No,
reframes
no,
and makes me realize it's not necessarily just, oh, the public was like, no, it's just the public never had a chance. You know what I mean? Like in a lot of cases, what you're saying, and I'm sure was the case, is that the public just never even had a shot at listening to these things because of the gatekeeping of kind of the radio industry. And I mean, it's kind of a pay to play thing. I mean, it
well,
is what it is.
you may have seen my clip on what was it, Hitman, the book Hitman. It was out 20, 30 years ago. A music writer who wrote and gave it one example, which was Columbia Records at the time in LA. Uh, Columbia had three executives, two of who were crooked like normal, and one of whom was straight like me. And he said, "I'm going to pick an act." And he announced this to the other two guys that we can't hurt. So I'm going to withdraw payola support for Los Angeles radio only. And it's Pink Floyd with the Another Brick in the Wall album. And let's just see what happens. Well, the thing goes #1 in the world. It's something like triple platinum. I don't know. It's huge. The tours are sold out. So his decision hasn't affected any of that. But the group visits for their concert in LA, and their managers that their record isn't being played in Los Angeles, and
That's
they're
hilarious.
massive. Yeah, and they call
Wow.
Columbia and they said, what's the deal?" And they said, "Well, this guy, decided to do an experiment." And he said, "Well, drop the experiment and you pay those guys right now." And boom, within a week, they're #1 in
Oh my
the LA
God.
market.
Yeah.
So,
Very,
so,
very crazy
so
stuff.
yeah, I'm sitting there doing Frida Payne's album, knowing full well that we're going to spend 90 days from the beginning of rehearsals on, and nobody's ever going to hear that.
Yeah.
I knew this. I knew this going into most of my dates.
Mhm. Wow.
And this was not, I took this down. I posted this originally on YouTube and I took it down almost immediately. I won't name the label, but one major label actually gave me a briefcase of money to fly to Chicago and hand to somebody because they said, "We can't do it. We'll get caught. But you're the music guy. So
Yeah.
nobody will think of you." And I did that once.
Wow.
I came home and hugged my wife and said, "Oh my God, I've become one of them." And I said, "That's it. We'll never do it again."
Wow.
But
That's
the
amazing.
dear man who sent me, who was head of promotion for that label, he just fessed up. He's the one that called me and said, John, we don't have the budget to produce what you, or I'm sorry, we don't have the budget to promote what you produce. So if you want this one to have a chance, here, go do this. And I thought, the music guy isn't going to get caught. The music guy is the one who's going to get caught because I'm a nothing, and I'm the one who will go to jail. And the network, those are the 5 guys across the United States that controlled airplay. They're untouchable. They would never go to jail. But little Johnny Florez, absolutely, put him in a cell, lock him away.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That is crazy stuff. Yeah, wow. Okay. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, although I got to be real, John. I have many. Okay. Let me ask you a couple more questions anyway. One was, were there any artists that you were like this close to producing and it kind of fell through, like somebody who, or did you just kind of, yeah, that's basically the question. Were there anything that like, oh, I'm close, and then it just went somewhere else?
With a qualifier on these, yes. I would get a call saying, are you interested in producing Dionne Warwick because she just signed with Warner Brothers? And my question back after saying, of course I would, was, who else is up for this job? And they said, Tom Bell. And I said, no.
Better give it to Tom.
That's a done deal. I'm not going to waste K's on this. Hire Tom, that's who you're going to hire anyway. So I entertained that briefly. I was supposed to produce, and you'll have to look this up, Mary something or other, who sang Torn Between Two Lovers.
Yeah, I don't know that one.
That was like a #1 record at the time, and I'm rehearsing her, and she has, unbeknownst to her, been already
Mary
dropped.
McGregor. Mary McGregor.
There you go.
Is the person.
Mary McGregor.
Mm-hmm.
I was supposed to produce her, and I was rehearsing her, and she didn't know that she had just been dropped from the label, and I didn't either.
Wow.
Another one was Audrey Landers, the Dallas actress on the TV show Dallas.
Sure.
She was a singer. She was a singer, and she was a good singer. And I'm rehearsing her because I was sent out, I believe, by Steve Bender at Talent Associates to work with her. And I'm rehearsing a tune with her called Go to Pieces. That was a Peter and Gordon song from the British invasion days. And I'm rehearsing it country with her, which, by the way, that song became a country hit a couple of years later. But while we're rehearsing, the phone rings. Her mother, who's her manager, says, Audrey, get in here. There's a call for you. And that was her offer to go on the TV show Dallas. So she comes back in and says, recording has to, take a backseat to my acting career now, John. So that's gone.
Wow.
I got, I spent my own money, and I flew back to New York, and I saw the president of RCA at the time, Tom Clancy. Clancy, you'll have to look it up. And I said, by the way, there was a gourmet presidential dining room at the RCA Records East Coast offices.
But of
we
course,
didn't have that shit in line. So in there with him and his #2 in command and whatever, and we were having lunch, and he said, well, why did you take the meeting, John? And I said, because I've produced 2 of your major acts in the last 5 years, and because you have nothing, I better rephrase that. I've produced 2 of your biggest acts in the last 5 years, made you a lot of money, and you dropped me from the first act, The Friends of Distinction, and you went against my wishes with the Hughes Corporation and decided to let Wally Holmes do more Rock the Boat sound-alike records, which I told you would end their career. So now that you have lost me virtually at least $1 million, do you have any work for me? Now, nobody's going to do that, but I'm naive enough just to lay the cloud on the table. So I did, and they said, well, we just signed this kind of, they had a semi-hit with Atlantic, this Hall and Oates, and we could set you up as a possible for them. You can interview with them, and we'll have our attorney call yours right away. Never heard back.
Ah, yeah.
It's a good thing, because with my style of production, my style is more like She's Gone, which they had on Atlantic Records, than what they ended up with Maneater and Rich Girl and all of that, which is not John's style. So it ended up working very well for them, and probably also for me, because I'll add to the list. I was supposed to work with Melissa Manchester for Clive, and Melissa and I rehearsed around the piano for a little while in Van Nuys, picked her up at the airport, took her to Darnielle's music room, rehearsed. And I said, okay, so what is your vision? What do you want to do with this album? And she said, well, John, I'd like to just do a whole bunch of experimenting, say, take, 3 to 6. And I looked at her and I said, Melissa, I am absolutely the wrong producer for you. Not only don't I want to spend that amount of time doing an album, but I also do a drug and alcohol-free environment. Now, what goes on outside of the room with my artists, I could care less. But we just tried tame, actually. But whatever.
I'm sure.
But I called Clive and declined Melissa Manchester after saying I didn't want to work 6 months in the studio on an album with her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. No. In the 70s, I'm sure weed would have been the lower level of drug that was happening often. So absolutely. I mean that.
Oh,
makes it.
that's I lost a lot. I lost a lot of work not doing drugs.
Yeah. Wow.
The act that
That's a
I
quote,
should,
my friend.
yeah, I know. The act I should have been, given by RCA. I mean, I'm sorry, but that was my family. That was my home. I was doing a good job for them. I was making us both money, and they should have offered me the main ingredient. You know who they are?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what Everybody Plays the Fool was their big hit.
Yes.
That who's the black actor whose father sang lead on it?
Cuba Gooding Jr.
Okay, Cuba Jr. Sr. was the lead of the main ingredient.
Yep.
Now Don Berkheimer, my mentor, signed them out of New York, and they weren't having hits. So wait a minute,
Yeah.
what's going on here?
Yeah.
It's very similar.
What's so interesting too about it is that particularly when you just look at the Friends distinction and you look at the hits they had, they mainly had hits with you, right? They didn't have much after that. Once you were kind of done with those first couple of albums, I guess that you had produced. After that, they just weren't there. And it's funny because you mentioned a lot that your pop soul was kind of exactly what you wanted to do. It's just it's unfortunate that, I mean, it seems to me, I mean, as a person who got a number 3 hit, across the country, as a person, and going in circles was like 15 or something. It seems to me is just almost like it just is a bad twist of fate, because maybe if you had had the chance to do more of your main ingredients, or your Friends, or your Fifth Dimensions, their careers could have benefited markedly, right? I mean, that's a possibility, but that didn't end up being the case.
I'll tell you right out of the box, the Fifth and I would have been successful together had Clive not pulled No Love in the Room and the group and everything from the stores. They dropped their contract. This was all without any of our knowing. My role was to take them just a little hipper than One Less Egg to Fry, One Less Bell to Answer, and we did that.
Yeah.
And we meaning the group and we were thrilled, and they said, we want you to do our next album, which they didn't get. They had to do a deal with Jimmy Webb in order to get a deal at ABC Dunhill Records. But my biggest issue for somebody who stood in front of the RCA convention in front of hundreds of people, said, "Thank you for my first year, but I wish there were more Black faces in this audience." You know, whoa. And the fact that no Black record executive ever offered me work ever in 18 years in the business. I had to get it from white A&R executives. Why? And Tom Draper, we won't go into it, who was head of A&R for the Black division in New York, and then I helped him get his job. I was his reference for his job as head of A&R for Warner Brothers Records. He cried at lunch one day and just said, "I can't hire you. There is significant social pressure on me from the Black community to try to stay with Black producers."
Yeah.
So I chose a form of music that I was less qualified to get work for because of the color of my skin.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's deeply ironic, obviously. It's just it's a
thought so.
wild story for sure.